A ruthless pharmaceutical billionaire sent his 19-year-old daughter into a winter storm that should have killed her. The helicopter went down exactly as planned. No survivors, no witnesses, no loose ends. He needed her dead, her trust fund unlocked, her reformist ideas silenced, and the federal investigation into his company buried with her body. He signed the death certificate before they even stopped searching. What he didn't know was that someone had pulled his daughter from the wreckage, a teenage girl who had every reason to let her freeze but didn't. Now, 10 days later, crystal chandeliers illuminate the Ashford Estate's grand ballroom. News cameras capture every angle as Richard Ashford stands before hundreds of mourners, his voice breaking with manufactured grief as he eulogizes his beloved Vivian. Behind him, lawyers finalize documents transferring her $50 million trust fund into his control. The federal investigation will die with her, they whisper. His empire is safe. His secrets are buried. Tonight, he's untouchable. Tonight, he has no idea his daughter is alive. 70 miles north, in a freezing cabin that barely keeps out the wind, Kendra Marshall presses 2 fingers against the stranger's neck, counting the pulse. The unconscious white girl wrapped in every blanket they own should be dead. 3 times she nearly was. 3 times Kendra pulled her back, burning through firewood and medicine her own dying mother desperately needs. She doesn't know why she's doing this. Rich people never saved her family. But her mother's words echo in the cabin's silence. We don't let people die, baby. That's what makes us different. Kendra checks the pulse again. Still there. Still fighting. Don't you dare die on me, she whispers. In 7 days, these 2 girls will walk into that memorial service and shatter everything Richard Ashford built. In 7 days, he'll learn exactly what it costs to sacrifice your daughter for profit. But it all starts here, in the moment where survival hangs by a thread and a stranger's compassion becomes the most dangerous thing a corrupt billionaire never saw coming. Before we dive into this story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments section and what time it is right there. Then don't forget to subscribe to our channel to support the work we do here. Now let me take you back to where it all started. Vivian settled into the helicopter's leather seat, her tablet balanced on her lap, highlighting sections of the quarterly report that made her stomach turn. A 4,000% markup on insulin. A life-saving medication her father's company manufactured for $4 and sold for $4,000. She'd practiced her speech for the board meeting a dozen times, imagined her father's face when she presented the alternative pricing model that would still generate profit, while actually saving lives. The pilot climbed in without his usual small talk. His hands trembled as he gripped the controls. Everything okay, Marcus? Vivian asked, glancing up from her notes. He nodded too quickly. Just tired, Miss Ashford. Long week. But his jaw was clenched tight, and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the December cold. Vivian had known Marcus for 3 years. He'd flown her to college campus tours, to charity events, to her mother's funeral. He never looked like this, never looked afraid. The helicopter lifted smoothly, banking west toward what her father had called an important facility tour. The mountains stretched below them, white and jagged and endless. Vivian returned to her notes, highlighting another damning statistic: 45,000 Americans dead last year because they couldn't afford medication. How many of those deaths had her family's policies caused? 20 minutes into the flight, Marcus changed course. Vivian looked up, frowning. We're heading north. The facility's west. He didn't answer. Didn't even glance back. Marcus? Why are we? Dark clouds swallowed the sky ahead, the kind of storm any pilot would avoid. Marcus flew straight into it. Turn around! Vivian shouted over the sudden roar of wind battering the helicopter. Marcus, what are you doing? He still wouldn't meet her eyes in the mirror. His knuckles were white on the controls, but he kept flying forward, into the teeth of the storm. That's when she understood. That's when the truth hit her harder than the turbulence slamming the helicopter sideways. This wasn't an accident. This was a plan. He paid you. Her voice came out flat, dead. My father paid you. Marcus's reflection in the glass showed everything: guilt, terror, resignation. "I'm sorry," he whispered, barely audible over the shrieking wind. "My daughter," he said, "my daughter." The helicopter shuddered violently. Alarm screamed. Metal groaned and twisted. Vivian grabbed for her seatbelt as the world tilted, spun, became a nightmare of glass shattering and her own screams mixing with the sound of the aircraft tearing itself apart. The impact was violence in its purest form, crushing, breaking, ending. Then silence. Horrible, ringing silence. Vivian opened her eyes to blood and snow and pain that made breathing feel like swallowing glass. The helicopter's frame hung above her, impaled on tree branches. Marcus was slumped forward, not moving, never moving again. She had to get out. Had to move before the fuel ignited or the wreckage collapsed or the cold finished what the crash had started. She dragged herself through the shattered door, leaving a crimson trail across white snow. Each movement was agony, but she crawled forward, away from the wreckage, into the blinding storm. The wind erased her screams. The snow swallowed her blood. And somewhere behind her, the helicopter that was supposed to be her coffin creaked and settled among the frozen trees, already disappearing beneath the falling white. The axe bit into frozen wood with a sound like breaking bones. Kendra's hands screamed in protest, the cracked skin splitting wider with each swing, blood mixing with the sawdust. She didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Winter didn't care about pain, and neither could she. 17 years old and her world had shrunk to this: chop wood, boil water, keep her mother breathing for one more day. The cabin behind her leaked cold through every gap in the walls, but it was all they had left after the medical bills devoured everything else: the house in town, her college fund, her father's truck before he disappeared, unable to watch his wife die slow. "Kendra?" Her mother's voice drifted through the open door, weak and wet with fluid that shouldn't be in lungs. "Baby, come inside. You'll freeze." "Almost done, Mama." The lie came easy now. She was never almost done. There was always more wood to chop, more water to haul, more hours to work at the gas station for minimum wage that wouldn't even cover groceries. Inside, Angela Marshall lay bundled under every blanket they owned, her brown skin ashen, her breathing a rattling struggle. The cough that started 3 months ago had become something worse, something hungry that was eating her from the inside out. "Did you call about the medication?" Angela asked, though they both knew the answer. "They said $4,000. Kendra knelt beside the bed, pressing a hand to her mother's burning forehead. "For a month's supply. 4,000. Angela's laugh turned into a coughing fit that bent her double, blood speckling the tissue she pressed to her mouth. "Might as well be 4 million. Kendra looked away before her mother could see the despair in her eyes. $4,000. She'd need to work 3 months straight, no food, no heat, no anything, just to afford 1 month of pills that cost some pharmaceutical company pennies to manufacture. The math was murder dressed up in medical terms. "I'll figure it out," Kendra whispered, knowing she wouldn't. Knowing winter would take her mother before spring came. She grabbed the axe and went back outside, needing the violence of splitting wood to keep from screaming. The forest pressed close around their cabin, pine trees heavy with snow, everything silent except for her ragged breathing and the rhythmic crack of the axe. She needed more wood. They were burning through it faster than she could chop, trying to keep the cabin above freezing. Kendra grabbed the sled and headed deeper into the trees, scanning for fallen branches dry enough to burn. That's when she saw the blood. Dark red against white snow, a trail leading east toward the creek. Fresh. Still liquid. Kendra followed it, some instinct making her move quiet, careful. Animals bled. So did people who didn't want to be found. The trail ended at the frozen creek's edge where a figure lay crumpled in the snow, wearing a white coat soaked crimson. A young woman, blonde hair matted with blood, lips blue, chest barely moving. Designer boots. Expensive jewelry. The kind of person who never set foot in these mountains by choice. Kendra checked for a pulse. Found one, weak and thready. The girl was dying. And Kendra had exactly 0 resources to save her. Kendra's first instinct was to walk away. The designer coat alone probably cost more than 3 years of her mother's medication. The leather boots were Italian, the kind she'd seen in magazine ads while waiting in the pharmacy, flipping through glossy pages of a world that had never once looked back at her. Rich people bought $1,000 shoes while her mother coughed blood into tissues they couldn't afford to replace. Rich people didn't help girls like Kendra. Why should she help them? She stood there, snow falling on the dying stranger, and felt nothing but the cold arithmetic of survival. Every minute she wasted here was a minute her mother sat alone in that freezing cabin. Every ounce of energy she spent dragging this girl back was energy she needed for chopping wood, for working, for keeping her own family alive. The girl's lips were blue. Her breathing so shallow Kendra had to watch for 10 seconds to see her chest move. Minutes. She had minutes left, maybe less. Kendra turned to leave. Actually took 3 steps back toward the cabin before her mother's voice stopped her cold, not the weak voice from the sickbed but the strong one from before, from when Kendra was little and asked why they gave food to the homeless man outside the grocery store when they barely had enough themselves. We don't let people die, baby. That's what makes us different. Different. As if being different had ever paid a bill or filled a prescription or kept the lights on. As if doing the right thing was worth anything in a world that had never done right by them. Kendra looked back. The girl hadn't moved. Wouldn't move. Would die here in the next few minutes, alone, and no one would ever know Kendra had found her. Damn it! Kendra's voice cracked on the words. She knelt beside the stranger and checked her injuries. Head wound, possibly concussion. Hypothermia, definitely severe. Frostbite starting on her fingers. Her pulse was barely there, a flutter against Kendra's fingers that could stop any second. This was insane. This would cost them everything. Kendra grabbed the girl under her arms and started dragging. The snow fought her with every step. The girl was dead weight, maybe 130 pounds of limp body that kept sliding from Kendra's grip. Her hands, already cracked and bleeding from chopping wood, screamed as she hauled the stranger across the frozen ground. 50 yards felt like 50 miles. Her lungs burned. Her back threatened to give out. She stopped 4 times to catch her breath, 4 times where she seriously considered just leaving the girl there and going home. Each time, her mother's words dragged her forward again. We don't let people die. The cabin appeared through the trees after what felt like hours. 2 hours to cover half a mile. Kendra's muscles were shaking, her vision blurring from exhaustion. She pulled the girl up the porch steps, each one a small mountain, and kicked the door open. Mama! She gasped. I need help. Angela Marshall looked at the bloodied white girl on her floor, looked at her daughter's desperate face, and didn't ask a single question. She just moved to help, because that's what they did. That's what made them different. They worked through the night, mother and daughter moving in desperate synchrony around the unconscious girl who might not see morning. Angela boiled water on the wood stove while Kendra stripped away the wet, blood-soaked clothing, replacing it with their own threadbare clothes, the warmest things they owned. Every blanket in the cabin went onto that makeshift bed by the fire. Every spare sweater, every worn quilt. Slowly, Angela cautioned when Kendra tried to move the girl closer to the flames. Too fast and will shock her system. She has to warm gradually. The hypothermia was severe. The girl's core temperature so low she barely registered as alive. They took turns holding her, sharing body heat, while the wood stove devoured their firewood at an alarming rate. By dawn, Kendra had burned through 3 days' worth of supply. By noon on the second day, a week's worth. The food went faster. Broth made from their last chicken, spooned carefully between blue lips. Hot tea with honey they'd been saving. Every calorie they could spare and several they couldn't. The fever hit on day 2, turning the girl's skin burning hot after being so cold. She thrashed and cried out, words tumbling from her in fragments that made no sense. The pilot's lying, she sobbed, eyes rolling beneath closed lids. Crash wasn't, he paid him. Ship, Angela soothed, pressing a cool cloth to the girl's forehead. You're safe now. Father, the investigation, he needed me. The girl's voice cracked. He needed me dead. Kendra and Angela exchanged glances across the bed. Delirium, probably. Or trauma. But the words had a terrible clarity to them, a specificity that felt like truth. While her mother kept watch, Kendra searched the girl's pockets. The phone was waterlogged, dead, screen cracked beyond repair. A credit card that meant nothing without electricity or internet. A crumpled boarding pass for a helicopter flight dated 3 days ago. And an ID card. Vivian Ashford. Age 19. The face in the photo matched the one on their floor, though the girl in the picture smiled with the easy confidence of someone who'd never known cold or hunger or fear. Mama! Kendra's voice came out strange, distant. Look at this. Angela took the ID, squinting in the firelight. Her sharp intake of breath said she recognized the name before she spoke. Turn on the radio. They kept a battery-powered radio for emergencies, used sparingly because batteries cost money. Kendra twisted the dial until voices emerged through static. Memorial service scheduled for Saturday at the Ashford estate. Richard Ashford released a statement calling his daughter's death an unbearable tragedy and praising the rescue teams who searched. Angela turned it off. They both looked at the girl on the floor, the girl the world thought was dead, whose father was already burying her, whose memorial service was in 4 days. What did we just do? Kendra whispered. Her mother's hand found hers in the firelight. We saved a life. Now we need to figure out why someone wanted to end it. Vivian woke to the smell of wood smoke and something else. Poverty, she realized, was shame, the scent of desperation that clung to places where survival was measured in days, not decades. Her head throbbed. Every breath sent fire through her ribs. She tried to sit up and a hand pressed her shoulder back down, firm but not unkind. Don't. The voice belonged to a black girl, maybe 17, watching her with eyes that held no warmth. You've been out for 3 days. You try to move too fast, you'll pass out again. Vivian's gaze traveled the room. Patched walls. A wood stove that barely kept back the cold. 2 women in threadbare clothes who looked like they hadn't slept in days. This wasn't a hospital. This wasn't anywhere money could reach. Where? Her throat felt like broken glass. Middle of nowhere. The girl, Kendra, she'd learn later, handed her a cup of water. Found you half dead by the creek. You're welcome, by the way. Memory crashed back. The helicopter. Marcus's terrified face. Her father's plan. The crash. Vivian whispered. The pilot. Yeah, you kept saying something about that. He paid him. Ring any bells? Vivian's hands started shaking. She was alive. She shouldn't be alive. That meant her father thought. That meant the world thought. They think I'm dead. It wasn't a question. Memorial service is in 4 days. Kendra confirmed, her tone flat. Your daddy's been real torn up about it on TV. Before Vivian could process that, a cough erupted from the corner. Deep, wet, the kind that spoke of lungs giving up their fight. An older woman lay in a bed by the far wall, her breathing labored, her skin carrying the gray pallor Vivian had seen before in hospitals, in people who were losing. Your mother, Vivian said, medical terminology clicking into place despite her injuries. Pulmonary fibrosis. Advanced stage. Kendra's eyes narrowed. You a doctor now? Pre-med. Before. Vivian gestured vaguely at everything. She needs medication. Nintedanib, probably, or pirfenidone. Pirfenidone. Kendra's voice went cold. $4,000 a month. We called every assistance program, every charity, every goddamn option. No one helps people like us. Vivian felt the words like a physical blow. What's the manufacturer? Does it matter? Tell me. Ashford Pharmaceuticals. Kendra watched understanding dawn on Vivian's face with something like satisfaction. Yeah. Your family's company. Small world, huh? Vivian's mouth went dry. She knew those numbers. Had just highlighted them in her report 3 days ago. Production cost, $4 per dose. Retail price, $4,000. A 100,000% markup on medication people needed to breathe, It costs $4 to make, Vivian heard herself say. $4. The rest is. She couldn't finish. Couldn't say what the rest was. Profit. Greed. Murder in slow motion. Kendra's laugh was bitter, broken. So your family's why my mother's dying. That about sum it up. Vivian looked at the woman who'd saved her life, at the mother who'd shared their last resources to keep a stranger breathing, and felt the full weight of her last name settle on her chest like concrete. Yeah, she whispered. That about sums it up. He was never a father, Vivian said, staring at the water in her cup like it held answers. He was a CEO who happened to have a daughter. Every conversation was a performance review. Every dinner a board meeting. When I told him I wanted to study medicine to help people, he said I was thinking too small. Kendra leaned against the wall, arms crossed, face unreadable. Poor little rich girl. Must have been so hard. I'm not asking for sympathy. Vivian's voice went sharp despite her exhaustion. I'm explaining why he'd want me dead. I was pushing for pricing reforms. Real ones. I had evidence of price fixing, of patent abuse, of every dirty trick he's used to keep medications expensive. I was going to present it to the board, force a vote. So you were gonna play hero. Kendra's skepticism dripped from every word. Reform the company from inside the castle. How noble. I know how it sounds. Vivian met her eyes. I know what my name means to people like you. But I was trying. Trying doesn't save my mother. Kendra's voice cracked. Trying doesn't pay for medication. Trying is what rich people do when they want to feel better about themselves without actually changing anything. The words hit like fists. Vivian wanted to argue, to defend herself, but what defense was there? Her mother had died 5 years ago from an illness money could have treated. She'd inherited wealth built on other people's suffering. Trying wasn't enough. It had never been enough. You're right, Vivian said quietly. But he still tried to kill me for it. She pulled the crumpled boarding pass from her pocket, smoothed it against her leg. Look at the route. The facility I was supposed to tour is west of the estate. Marcus flew north, straight into the worst storm of the season. That's not pilot error. That's a plan. Kendra took the pass, studied it. Her expression shifted slightly, suspicion giving way to reluctant interest. The crash site, Vivian continued, is 70 miles from where we should have landed. He kept apologizing, kept saying something about his daughter. My father threatened someone he loved, and Marcus chose his family over mine. Her voice broke. I don't blame him. But the helicopter going down wasn't the end. It was supposed to ensure no one ever questioned what happened. So what are you saying? Kendra asked. That someone might come looking? Make sure the job's finished? If my father's willing to crash a helicopter, he's willing to send people to verify I'm dead. And if they find out you saved me, we're both dead. Kendra finished the thought, her jaw tight. Perfect. So I used up all our supplies to save someone who brought killers to our door. I didn't ask you to save me. No, you just died on my mountain and made it my problem. They glared at each other across the tiny cabin, two girls from different worlds bound together by blood and snow and the mistakes of powerful men. Angela's labored breathing filled the silence between them. He has to pay, Vivian said finally. For what he did to me. For what he's doing to your mother. For all of it. Kendra's expression hardened into something like resolve. Then we get you to civilization. You expose him. And you fix your family's mess. She paused. Starting with getting my mother that medication. Deal. They shook hands like sealing a contract neither one trusted, but both desperately needed. The two men arrived in town driving a black SUV with tinted windows and search and rescue decals that looked fresh off the printer. They wore expensive tactical gear and smiles that didn't reach their eyes, the kind of smiles that made people answer questions without knowing why. We're following up on the Ashford helicopter crash, the taller one said, showing a photo of Vivian to the woman behind the gas station counter. Looking for any survivors who might have wandered from the site. Disoriented, injured. You seen anyone like that? The woman studied the photo, pretty blonde girl, rich clothes, and shook her head. Nobody like that comes through here. We don't get many outsiders, especially not in winter. They asked for more people. Got 4 more negative responses. Then they asked the old man outside the hardware store, and his eyes shifted just slightly before he answered. Can't say I've seen her. But there's a girl lives up north in the mountains, keeps to herself. Marshall girl. Her and her sick mother don't come to town much anymore. How far north? The shorter man asked, already turning toward the SUV. 5-6 miles up the logging road. Cabin's pretty isolated. Doubt she'd have anything to do with your missing person, though. We'll check anyway. The tall one's smile never wavered. Can't leave any stone unturned. They drove north with the heat blasting and weapons in the glove box. Their orders were clear: find the body, or make sure there was one to find. Richard Ashford paid well for certainty, and loose ends were expensive mistakes either man intended to make. At the cabin, Vivian winced as she tied her borrowed boots, each movement pulling at injuries that hadn't begun to heal. 3 days of rest wasn't enough. She could barely walk without her ribs screaming. But they couldn't wait. Every hour they stayed was another hour for someone to find them. Kendra stuffed supplies into a backpack: water, the last of their food, matches, a knife that had seen better decades. Not enough for a 6-mile trek through winter terrain, but it was all they had. You sure you can make this? Kendra asked, watching Vivian struggle to stand. No choice. Vivian gritted her teeth against the pain. We stay, we die. Simple math. Angela sat propped in bed, her breathing labored but her eyes clear. She'd insisted they go, insisted she'd be fine alone for the day it would take them to reach town and send help back. They all knew she was lying. They all pretended to believe her. Mama! Kendra's voice broke. Go. Angela reached for her daughter's hand. Get to town. Expose that man. Get yourself safe. I'll send help as soon as we arrive, Vivian promised. And the medication. I swear. I know you will, baby. Angela squeezed her hand. Now listen to me, both of you. Her gaze moved between them, fierce despite her weakness. Trust nobody but each other. The world out there isn't kind to girls like you, and men like that one's father don't leave witnesses. You watch each other's backs, you hear me? They left at dawn, 2 figures trudging through snow that reached their knees, heading south toward a town that felt like it belonged to another world. Behind them, smoke from the cabin's chimney rose into the gray sky, a beacon that would guide help home, or lead predators straight to their door. 5 miles north, the black SUV turned onto the logging road, tracks fresh in the snow. Vivian's boots were designer, Italian leather, made for stepping out of limousines onto red carpets. They were not made for 6 miles of frozen hell. By the first mile, her feet were numb. By the second, she was leaving blood in the snow. Keep moving, Kendra snapped when Vivian stopped for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. You fall behind, you freeze. Simple as that. I'm trying. Try harder. Kendra's voice held no sympathy. She'd been walking these mountains since she could stand, knew them like some people knew city streets. Vivian knew boardrooms and country clubs and absolutely nothing that mattered out here. They crossed the frozen river, Kendra testing each step while Vivian followed in her exact footprints, terrified the ice would crack and swallow them both. They climbed slopes where one wrong move meant sliding 50 feet down into rocks and trees. Vivian learned to read the sky for coming storms, to recognize the sound of unstable snow, to push past exhaustion because stopping meant dying. When the whiteout hit, they took shelter in a shallow cave, pressed together for warmth while the world outside became a wall of white nothing. I've never had a real friend, Vivian said into the darkness, her voice small. People wanted to be close to my name, my money, my father's influence. But no one ever just wanted me. Kendra was quiet for a long moment. I had friends. Before we lost everything. Before Mama got sick. They disappeared real quick when we couldn't afford to keep up anymore. She paused. I'm terrified she's going to die while I'm out here. Terrified I'll get back and she'll just be gone. We'll make it in time. You don't know that. No, Vivian admitted. But we have to believe it anyway. The storm cleared. They moved on. And that's when Vivian saw them, two figures maybe a quarter-mile back, moving with the kind of precision that spoke of training, of purpose, of men who hunted for a living. Kendra, she whispered. Behind us. Kendra looked back and cursed. Run. They ran, stumbling through deep snow, Vivian's injuries screaming with every step. The men gained ground. Professional versus desperate, experience versus panic. The frozen lake appeared ahead, a vast expanse of white that might be solid, or might be a death trap. Across! Kendra shouted. It's our only chance! They hit the ice running. Vivian heard it crack before she felt it give way, a sound like a gunshot, then she was falling into water so cold it stopped her heart. She went under, the weight of her clothes dragging her down into black nothing. Then hands grabbed her coat, hauling her up with impossible strength. Kendra pulled her onto solid ice, dragged her 20 more feet before they both collapsed, gasping, soaking wet in sub-zero temperatures. Behind them, the trackers had stopped at the lake's edge, smart enough to know the ice wouldn't hold 3 people. But they weren't leaving. They were circling, looking for another way across. Get up, Kendra wheezed, her own teeth chattering. Town's another mile. We make it there, we're safe. We stop, we're dead. Vivian got up. They ran toward a civilization that felt like a fairy tale, chased by men who dealt in nightmares, racing against cold that wanted to claim them both. They arrived at the Ashford estate looking like ghosts, battered, soaking wet, clothes borrowed and torn, faces carrying the marks of survival that money could never buy. Security moved to stop them at the gate, but Vivian pulled back her hood and watched recognition ripple through the crowd like a shockwave. The dead girl was walking. Inside the grand ballroom, chandeliers blazed over hundreds of mourners dressed in designer black. Richard Ashford stood at the podium, mid-eulogy, his voice breaking at precisely the right moments. Then the doors burst open and the room went silent. Vivian limped down the center aisle, Kendra at her side, and watched her father's face cycle through emotions too fast to hide, shock, rage, calculation, then a desperate attempt at joy that looked like a mask slipping. Vivian! He rushed toward her, arms outstretched for cameras that had swiveled to capture the moment. Thank God! We thought you're confused, sweetheart, the trauma. I'm not confused. Vivian's voice cut through the ballroom like ice. And I'm not your sweetheart. I never was. She pulled a small recording device from her pocket, recovered from the wreckage, from Marcus's jacket, where dying men keep their insurance. This is the pilot, 3 days before the crash, negotiating payment for my murder. The voice on the other end is your lawyer, Dad. Want to hear it? Richard's smile cracked. You don't understand what you're. I understand you paid Marcus $50,000 to crash that helicopter. I understand you needed me dead because I was going to expose your price-fixing scheme to the board. She turned to face the cameras, the investigators who'd been circling his company for months. I understand you've been gouging life-saving medication at 100,000% markup while people died because they can't afford to breathe. She gestured to Kendra. This is Kendra Marshall. She saved my life with resources she didn't have. Her mother is dying from pulmonary fibrosis because she can't afford medication that costs my father $4 to manufacture and $4,000 to buy. You tried to kill me because I threatened your profits. How many others have you killed because they threatened your bottom line? You ungrateful. Richard's composure shattered completely. I built this empire. Everything you have, everything you are, I created. You have no idea what it takes, what sacrifices. Sacrifices? Vivian's laugh was broken glass. You sacrificed me. You sacrificed thousands of people like Kendra's mother. You sacrificed anything resembling humanity for money you couldn't even spend in 10 lifetimes. Richard lunged at her, hands reaching for her throat, screaming about empires and hard choices and children who didn't understand legacy. Federal agents grabbed him before he made contact, pulled him back while he thrashed and broke and showed the world exactly who he'd always been. They arrested him on live television. Attempted murder. Conspiracy. Fraud. The list would grow longer in the coming weeks, but Vivian didn't stay to watch. She had a promise to keep. 3 months later, Angela Marshall sat on her cabin porch, no longer coughing, her medication paid for in perpetuity by the Ashford Medical Assistance Foundation. Vivian had used her trust fund to establish it within days of her father's arrest, $50 million dedicated to providing life-saving medications at cost to anyone who needed them. Kendra was teaching Vivian to chop wood, correcting her grip for the 10th time while Vivian laughed and missed the log completely. They'd enrolled Kendra in college starting fall semester, full scholarship, pre-law because someone needed to keep pharmaceutical companies honest. "You're terrible at this," Kendra said, but she was smiling. "I know." Vivian set down the axe and looked out at the mountains where she'd nearly died, where she'd learned what it meant to be saved by someone who had nothing to gain. "But I'm learning." They stood together, two young women who'd walked through fire and ice, who'd chosen each other when the world told them not to, who'd survived not just winter but the kind of cold that lives in powerful men's hearts. The mountains stretched before them, no longer a place of death but a reminder that the hardest journeys forge the strongest bonds. Sisters. Not by blood, but by something better. By choice.